Hello and welcome to the Nakatomi Break Room. I'm your host, Christian Seel, joined as always by Zander Massey.
Hello.
And Blake Bauman.
Hello.
I feel like we didn't get your hello.
So put some stank on it, Blake.
Hello.
We are three working stiffs in the film industry who love movies. I work in visual effects, Zander has a background in film finance and distribution, and Blake works in feature animation. Here we talk about the art, business, and culture of cinema. All right, get out your spare gas cans, your water beds, your flower print wallpaper, and get ready to run a long distance through the San Fernando Valley. As we are talking about Licorice Pizza. The movie follows the two leads, Gary Valentine, who is a precocious child actor and I guess you would say hustler, and Alana, who is a young woman who starts out working for a children's photographer, which is where the two meet and are immediately drawn to each other. What follows is a series of episodic misadventures that are kind of loosely tied together by Gary's quixotic business ventures and Alana's misadventures in her struggle to find herself. And they fall in love.
I learned that vinyl is made out of oil.
Yeah, that's one of many fun facts you learn throughout the movie. All right, so thoughts on this movie? Tell me, Blake, how did you feel about this movie?
To this day, I'm not sure if it was just my first screening that made me love this movie so much. You know, you could see a average film, but if the whole crowd is totally into it, you're just instantly like, oh, this is one of the greatest movies I've seen in a while. Like, yeah. I don't know, you just get the energy. I'm not 100% sure if that is what happened with me on Licorice Pizza.
You know, it's very segmented. It feels like there's so much time that passes in the movie, but I think it's actually a pretty short period of time.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was going to ask you guys, because I had a real hard time getting a read on how much time actually passed in the movie. It kind of felt like there was too much stuff on the sandwich. Like, there's a little bit of Magnolia, there's a little bit of Boogie Nights, there's a little bit of Phantom Thread, there's a little bit of Inherent Vice, but it didn't feel like it really came together as enough of any of those, so it was kind of like too much of some of that stuff and not really enough of any of it. But I really do love the relationship between the two main characters. And it felt like we had to go so far through so many cameos to get there that it was just like, I would have appreciated a much smaller movie that was focused on the dynamic between the two leads.
I kind of agree with you, Christian, I had a great time with those it was almost like there were multiple little vignettes throughout the film. Most of them did not relate to the relationship directly, but I just was along for the ride, so I enjoyed it. But yeah, I get what you mean, where I loved they stole every single scene that they were in.
You know what's kind of interesting, actually? So she says, "I love you, Gary." He doesn't say anything at the end. Maybe it's because it's implied that he just loved her from minute one.
Right, like he's basically been saying that the whole movie, and we're just
But he never actually says it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very fitting, though, for his character, because he's just extremely immature, but he's also getting into these very mature businesses.
That's interesting, though. You found him to be immature.
I think so.
Because I thought he was very mature. You know,
there's
precocious. A lot of he's precocious. Yeah, precocious would be the word for it.
And I mean, he's very, sorry to interrupt you, but he's very cocky.
Cocky, yeah. Yeah. He's extremely confident.
More mature, I think, for sure, in his business ventures. But I think when it comes to his dealings with Elena specifically,
he's more mature than she is. So by comparison, he seems like more of an adult than she is. It seems like she stopped emotionally maturing after high school and just continued to be like locked in this phase where she's living with like three sisters and her family treats her like a child. She works for a photographer who photographs children. So it's like that kind of thing where you're in this, like the kind of mumblecore phase of adulthood where you've graduated from college or you're in those early to mid 20s years, but you don't have a career, you don't have any money, and you don't know what you're doing.
My take was this is, and I mentioned to you guys that I feel like this is a coming of age story that's flipped on its head, because this is a coming of age story for the adult. You know, it's her coming of age story.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Precocious.
The movie follows him primarily, but it really is about her. and she's the one
Right.
who arcs. He doesn't really arc.
No, he's a plateau for the whole movie.
Yeah, and even at the end, he's just running along, just keeps running. There is so much running in this movie.
Okay, so I was gonna Google it and then I ran out of time. But like, why is there so much running in this movie? Like, do you think there's a metaphor there? Because I think there is, but I'm still trying to figure it out.
Is that like the 70s thing? Jogging was a new thing in the 70s? Because this movie, to me, this really felt like the 1970s were more of a character in this movie than the San Fernando Valley. Because you have very period-specific things like the water beds, the popularity of water beds, and the whole pinball thing. Leonardo DiCaprio's dad just drops like heavy 70s slang on him.
Yeah, it's certainly a character. Sean Penn's character is just like such a great like old Hollywood.
Okay, so Alana is in a journey to find herself through a series of episodes where she becomes semi-involved with different men throughout the movie. She auditions for a role opposite a fictionalized version of William Holden, played by Sean Penn. Afterward, he invites her to dinner, and he meets up with an old friend played by Tom Waits, and it just goes crazy from there.
Yeah,
Sean.
that scene is absurd. Like, it feels like we're no longer in reality. I think to your point, Christian, is that it feels like a lot of these are vignettes that are jam-packed together.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about with like too much stuff on the sandwich. Sean Penn's character jumps a 300-pound street bike over a pile of burning chairs on a golf course in this impromptu stunt that they do with the entire restaurant patronage as an audience. This is like
Very
a scene out of
unimpressive.
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas almost. And if the whole movie were like this, it would probably be one of my favorite movies ever. Like, see, I love Inherent Vice. I think I'm probably alone in that. It's a really solid film noir detective movie. You know, people say it's like the plot is completely incoherent, and that's not unfair. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody loves The Big Sleep. Explain that fucking plot to me. It makes less sense than Inherent Vice. Like, I will explain Inherent Vice to you right now. What do you want to know? I'll explain the whole movie to you.
You are.
I like it. I like it a lot.
I do
But
not.
I'm also a huge Big Lebowski fan, and I feel like it's partially a love letter to Big Lebowski.
Yeah, well, Blake, you and I will fight.
That's fair. After this, we'll
the
parking
death.
lot, you know?
Okay, but see what I love.
You guys can meet in Central Coast, California.
That sounds fantastic.
We'll meet halfway. We'll meet in San Luis Obispo and have some wine. I didn't like it the first time I saw it. I had to see it more than once, and then it kind of clicked for me after I saw it the second time.
Yeah,
You know,
I think I
there's-
saw it 3 times. I could use a refresher on that movie.
You should, man. People don't like it because I guess the plot is not
Existent.
what. Okay, we're talking about Paul Thomas Anderson here. What of his movies have a fucking plot, man?
Yeah.
I think
I would say
Boogie Nights is probably the most plotty.
Yeah, I was just about
yeah,
to say.
The Tower
fair.
Fall from Grace.
I think Boogie Nights probably has the most.
Actually, but you know what? I would actually argue. I mean, like Phantom Thread has like a plot. I mean, also
What is
that.
What's that movie
Yes. Again, it's kind of like a relationship, but it's just like a really messed up one that ends up just like, oh yeah, by the way, our relationship is toxic.
Well,
Yeah.
hold that thought for 1 second because Hard 8 actually does have it's kind of a crime thriller. So now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's his first movie, Hard 8, with
Yeah.
Philip Baker Hall, and it basically stars John C. Reilly, Gwyneth Paltrow is in it, Samuel L. Jackson. It's a totally
Did he do
forgotten
Three
movie.
Kings?
No, that's
Three
David
Kings?
O. Russell.
Ah.
Yeah, Hard 8.
I don't know. I agree. I think I need to give it another shot. The other PTA movies, I'm a huge fan. Like, you just made a ton of winners. I just recently watched Punch Drunk Love for the first time, like a couple of months ago.
Oh, yeah, I love that movie.
Holds up?
Loved it.
See, that's the only one
A lot
I
of
think
really
I've
good
seen
sound.
once.
Oh yeah, the only one I've seen once is Phantom Thread, which
Oh wait,
it
yeah,
just
I've only
seems
seen Phantom Thread once.
seems like a pain to watch again, but I also respect it and I should watch it again.
Oh, I saw that with you, Zander, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
We went to a concert in LA. I think it was at the Walt Disney Concert Hall. They grabbed all of the Oscar nominees for Best Score, and they performed live with like a full, I think the LA Philharmonic was performing.
man.
And so
That sounds
year
amazing.
specifically was phenomenal, and I don't know why they don't do it again because it was such a treat. John Williams was nominated for Best Score for I think it was for Last Jedi. Johnny Greenwood for Phantom Thread.
Alexander Desplat for
For Shape of Water.
Shape of Water, who won?
And then Hans Zimmer for Dunkirk. Like it was a treat.
That's
it
epic.
was
All
so
there.
cool.
Like Guillermo was there. We saw him like try to run across stage, which was just one of the most precious moments of my life.
So, okay, now back to Phantom Thread. I think this is almost like the same movie in that it's kind of about this dysfunctional relationship, and there are like these destructive elements to both of them. But at the same time, like the Phantom Thread, it takes so long to get there. And it really only is like at the very end. This at least had some kind of back and forth throughout the movie. But the reason why I like The Phantom Thread more is that movie feels very tight to me. That feels like a movie that a director who's like very mature in his craft made. You know, you have these scenes that are very slow, but they're very measured and controlled.
Isn't that like kind of a form follows function? In The Phantom Thread, it is about a characters who are very calculated and tight and, you know, I guess manipulative as a part of the other side of the same coin. And this movie is like chaotic.
And also the nature of the time period. I feel like that fits the vibe of 70s. I think the main reason why I enjoyed this film so much is like, it seems kind of miscalculated and a little jumbled, but every single bit of these like wild rides that they go on, maybe it doesn't really fully build on their relationship, but I think that they're just having a good time and I'm enjoying watching it, you know?
And this is very much a along for the ride type of movie. I love the
did not get to the ride.
You're like, slow down.
I love the dramatic element between the two characters, but just all of these episodes with these various actors, it literally has no value for the main story. But these feel like stories that, like Hollywood stories that people tell at dinner parties. Oh, I was at this restaurant one time in Encino, and you know William Holden was there, and then everybody in the restaurant went out back, and he jumped a motorcycle over a pile of burning chairs. Or like, you know, back in the 70s when we ran out of gas, a buddy of mine was at a gas station, and John Peters came up and started smashing somebody's windshield.
Oh man, John Peters. That whole thing is great.
Yeah, so there's a great account of John Peters in Kevin Smith's special, An Evening with Kevin Smith. It's worth watching just for the John Peters, because he sounds like a madman. If anything, Bradley Cooper may have undersold it, but...
Yeah, like you're just waiting for there to be like cocaine in that scene.
Yeah, you expect him to be like doing so much cocaine he can barely even talk.
Oh, okay. Man, but... The "do you like peanut butter sandwiches" pickup line is just a fantastic scene.
Oh man.
He throws a fucking garbage can through a window, then runs back to the women in tennis skirts.
I'm entertained by the character. I feel like there was way too much Bradley Cooper in this movie.
Yeah,
I mean, I will say though, he's on screen max maybe 10, 15 minutes. Is that already too much Bradley?
You know, I really like Bradley Cooper. I just did not want him in this role. I feel like I was trying to think who could be a better John Peters. Well, Kate said the first thing she said was Colin Farrell. And I was like, I would love Colin Farrell in this role.
He looks like him too. You know, I was kind of just along for the ride the first time I watched it, but the second time I watched it, I just kept thinking that he basically is reprising his role in Wedding Crashers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Which is a great character. And that was before Bradley Cooper was Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, he's a great psychotic asshole in that movie, in both movies. I feel like it's impossible to talk about this movie without mentioning the John Michael Higgins character, the white guy who owns a Japanese restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
So between that scene and when he makes the joke about the beavers, I feel like this movie is an inside joke and I'm just completely missing everything. I was like totally baffled by the John Michael Higgins thing. If you're not familiar with the Audrey Hepburn movie Breakfast at Tiffany's, Mickey Rooney plays a character that is a Japanese man that is kind of like the gold standard for offensive Asian stereotypes. And this is really giving Mickey Rooney a run for his money. It's not just one.
It was interesting afterwards of just like seeing PTA in interviews of trying to justify it.
What was his justification?
His justification was basically like, oh, well, that's how people were in the 70s, and we wanted to make him seem like a buffoon the way that you put it in there is you're trying to have him be comedic relief.
It's clearly mocking this like white man, but it still is just it really has no point in being there. The movie doesn't
so
need it.
Jarring.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't get it because the movie isn't at all about race. And if you're going to make a movie about race in America, the 1970s are a time of noteworthy racial tension in the United States. And so if you're going to address race, it should be an actual part of the movie, I guess, and not just like this one random disconnected joke.
Yeah, that was the one part during my screening that people truly did not know how to react to it.
It was like an uncomfortable silence in the theater.
Yeah, and then it also goes on like for a little bit too long too.
Yeah, he does it multiple times in two different non-consecutive scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
I feel like the Gary Valentine character was kind of like the Jason Schwartzman character in Rushmore, but if you take away like 99% of the charm.
Oh my God.
I guess you're right. I guess he's not the most charming character.
He definitely thinks he is, but he's the son of the late great PSH, and I don't get that at all from him. You know, like you see these sons of famous actors, like you see actors like John David Washington, who he really does look like and sound like his father, the son of Ice Cube, who like literally looks exactly like Ice Cube.
Yeah. Right, he played him in
Straight Outta Compton.
Yeah.
Hoffman Cooper does not look or sound a lot like PSH.
No. There's one moment in the movie where he calls Alana and then doesn't, he like is quiet on the other side of the phone.
Oh, and it reminded you of Happiness?
It does. Actually, I did not think of that. While he's waiting on the other side of the phone, you see him doing this thing where he's got his like two fingers against his eye. And that's like a Philip Seymour Hoffman trope that he does in a lot of movies.
Oh, interesting.
Where like he's stressed out and he goes like this.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, I feel like he's always like a good-hearted guy, but who's tortured. This character that Cooper Hoffman plays couldn't be more different than that.
I'm going to say that I don't completely agree with that because I think Philip Seymour Hoffman's kind of a chameleon. Like if you see him in Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, he's like,
tortured in that.
But he's a douchebag. He's not lovable. He's a bad guy.
Oh, sure. I guess, but if I'm summing him up in one word, and that would be tortured.
Always tortured.
He's always tortured.
Yeah, I buy that. Yeah.
Almost always, I guess.
Maybe, yeah. I was going to say Along Came Polly, but even in that, he's tortured.
Or like State and Maine, where he's the writer. He's always dealing with something that he really can't come to terms with, whether it's explicitly addressed on screen or if it's just part of the backstory that lends to like the psychology of the character. He's always like struggling with something.
What about in Big Lebowski?
Brad. Yeah. Well, he's trying to get him to stop touching that shoe thing on the wall.
Yeah. Thank you. That's such a good character. But yeah, there is very little resemblance in the way he acts and the way he looks. Like I think it's extremely watchable. Whether he's charming or not, I think is a good question. But whether I'm entertained or not is no question for me. I love watching him in that character.
Oh yeah. No, I'll watch him all day, and her too. Like the character of Alana, she's struggling to find herself, and he's very self-confident, and so they complement each other in that way, and that's really interesting to watch. And she's stunted, and he's precocious. And they just have all these great complementary features.
Man, some of their back and forths are so freaking funny. I loved not only between the two of them, but also her with her family or just other people.
Oh, that scene where she singles out every member of her family and screams in their face.
I was dying. You're a thinker. You think things.
That's the best scene in the movie.
So good.
I guess it's kind of a depressing story for her in the end, because if you think about it, she kind of like cycles through all these men, it's basically like, here are the best men the San Fernando Valley has to offer. One is a over the hill actor who's like basically living on a different planet and doesn't even know who she is. Mm-hmm. Another is this psychotic asshole. And another is like the seemingly perfect man who is sensitive and confident and put together and has his shit together, and he turns out to be gay, and then she ultimately settles on this underage high school kid.
Yeah. Which we should throw out there that if this was if the 15-year-old was a female and the 25-year-old was a male, this would be a very, very different movie.
Oh, you'd have never gotten away with it.
Yeah.
But
well,
yeah.
okay, so yeah, elephant in the room. Literally, the first thing out of everybody's mouth is like, "But how are you even able to enjoy it when you knew that the relationship was just between like an underage kid and an older woman?" And then I'm like, I don't know. It's a movie. Like, I don't think that took me out of it at all. I mean,
maybe a questionable statement, but like, it's clear that he is more mature than she is, right?
He's also
doesn't feel like imbalanced. They're emotionally at a similar state.
He's also the primary instigator of the sexual aspects of their relationship. It's right. Never really about that for her with him until maybe like halfway through the movie.
Well, I mean, one of the most questionable scenes in terms of like being sexually inappropriate is where he hovers his hand over her boob while she's passed out.
Yeah, I really wish they hadn't put that scene in.
Yeah, I'm glad they cut to the shot where there's space where you see that it's hovering and not actually in direct contact. But yeah, I mean that's the 15-year-old being sexually inappropriate to the 25-year-old, not vice versa.
Yeah. I didn't feel like that added anything, and it was really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because you don't know if he's going to do it, and then it's like, okay, are we going down this path? Like, where are we going with this?
It's like thank God, you know?
Yeah, because through the whole movie, I feel like he's not like overtly creepy or anything like that. Like, there's like still like a lot of charm between the two of them, and I feel like that's what kind of adds to it. Like, by the end of the movie, I'm not even really, I forget sometimes that there's like an age difference, and I think that's what the movie does so well is like, yeah, but like it's obvious that they have charm and they have a really good relationship, and it just kind of bloomed into something bigger.
If he were like a senior in high school and she was 25 or 28, so that you maintain the 10-year age gap, would this movie have worked?
I think first of all, the age of 28, like 25 seems more of a turning point.
Okay, well, so let's just say he's, a senior in high school. He's 18, so he's the underage aspect isn't a factor.
There's an element of let's say he was 17. There's an element of, well, why don't you just wait, 6 more months till he turns 18 so that this isn't like illegal or questionable. Mm-hmm. So I think that changes it a little bit.
There's a great scene with the Bradley Cooper sequence which this is a great sequence, by the way. So they end up coasting down the hill because the truck runs out of gas, and Gary and his friends and family go off to go get gas. We see her sitting on the curb and looking at them, and I get the impression that she's kind of like, what am I doing with my life? And they're just being completely immature and like jerking off the gas can and like joking around.
That's interesting. That I hadn't thought about that, but it is, like a introspective moment for her. Yeah.
So Benny Safdie.
Yeah.
So of all of the cameos in this movie, he was the only one I felt like didn't bother me, because you know who he is. He's a name, but it's not like that. Bradley Cooper is like, I'm Bradley Cooper and this is the Bradley Cooper show, and now you're watching Bradley Cooper for the next 5 minutes. The Benny Safdie thing was not that.
No, he seems like an actor that was hired to play a part.
Yeah.
I actually kind of agree with you where the Bradley Cooper part, it felt like he was playing a part. Like it was almost like over the top to the point where I'm like, I'm just watching Bradley Cooper be insane. But me knowing that was Benny Safdie, I don't know. There's just some people who just fit the era, and he just fits this like 70s politician.
It's noteworthy that Benny Safdie is like 9 out of 10 people don't know who that is. Maybe they've seen Good Time, but chances are they haven't.
Yeah, and even if you've seen Good Time,
is.
You probably don't remember that that's him because he plays a handicapped man.
Yeah, I mean, that's a transformative role.
He's kind of the king of cameos. I feel like he's popped up in a lot of stuff.
Oh, really?
He is in the Obi-Wan series for one episode.
That's right, which I worked on.
Oh, yeah? Did you? How about
Wait, you didn't know that?
Actually,
I did not know that.
Yeah. Blake, I don't know if you know this, but I live in the San Fernando Valley.
Do you?
In Sino.
Xander knows this. Yeah.
Yeah.
My daughter goes to a daycare place that is on Magnolia Boulevard. It's basically living that movie every day when I drop her off.
Yeah. Like that and all the frogs raining from the sky.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes there are frogs. I usually take a different way. I think Licorice Pizza is the name of a record store in the 70s in the San Fernando Valley. I feel like I read that.
Okay. I was wondering because it doesn't really, they don't hit you over the head with the
I
the
feel
name
like
selection.
Otherwise I would have just felt like it was a random meaningless title, which it basically is.
I mean, like potentially, like I can make it work. Like things that don't seem like they go together, but maybe do.
Yeah. And speaking of things that don't seem like they go together, but really do.
Perfect transition.
Yeah, so the second movie we watched was the classic Hal Ashby, Harold and Maude. I assume that all three of us have seen this movie before, but we're watching it again for the sake of this. You hadn't seen this, Blake?
I had not seen this.
Oh, no. Nice.
Awesome.
First round.
Have you seen Being There?
No.
Being There is it's so, I saw that for the first time last year. It's a must watch. It's fantastic.
I mean, that's one of those movies that I sit down and make Kate watch these movies because I'm like, I know you're not going to like this, but this movie is so important to me that for the sake of our marriage, you need to see it.
I know of this movie, but yeah, I've never seen it. But yeah, no, this was definitely, it was a treat. I really enjoyed it.
Harold is a young, pale weirdo played by Bud Cort, and he has an obsession with death, and he stages these elaborate suicide scenes for his poor mother, and he routinely attends funerals of strangers, and this is where he meets the other character, Maude, who is a 79-year-old woman with a passion for life. And together they forge an unconventional love story.
Man, I can't believe you said his poor mother. His mother's just such a detestable character.
Really? You think she is?
Yeah, I just want to see her get tortured.
I think as a parent, having to see that like over and over, even when you're used to it, is just like, there's nothing worse. So even, I felt like she was just kind of like she was more neutral.
The scene, but I know we kind of don't want to start by diving immediately.
No, do whatever, man.
That's fine.
Where she's like she wants to have him like fill out a form to like find a match, you know, whatever like
that scene
70s
is
version
so
of a dating
funny.
app is. Yeah, I mean it's a hilarious scene, but the fact that she, you know, she's
having such a good
by
time.
being like, what do you, she's like, Harold, what do you think about this? And then she like answers the question for him. And then it breaks down to the point where she doesn't even remember to ask him. She's like, oh, I have backaches and headaches every night. You know?
Oh,
like,
I love that scene. I thought that actress nailed it.
She's amazing. Yeah. But like when he's pointing the gun at her, like there's a little piece of me saying, pull that trigger.
I feel like the earlier suicides are not as funny. They're more kind of strange.
Yeah, they're kind of over the top gruesome. I didn't get any preface for the movie. I had no context, anything. And so walking into the movie not knowing what to expect, and then
that's the best way to see a movie.
Yeah.
Agreed. And so it was interesting to walk into it, and then he just like hangs himself. And so that was like a great intro. And also, by the way, the entire soundtrack was done by Cat Stevens. I'm like, okay, I'm going to enjoy this movie. It's a great way to jump into it.
The whole Cat Stevens album is fantastic. Like, I mean, I'm a big fan of this movie. I think that generally when a movie's a cult classic, I'm probably going to love it. There's so many scenes where you think it's going to be lighthearted, and then suddenly it's like very deep and you know,
and dark,
like, explorative and dark. Those are the scenes that make it so rewatchable. You know, I totally forgot that she's a Holocaust survivor. Such a very subtle exposition of that. I think this movie and Being There are the only two of his movies that I've seen, but both just like exquisitely crafted movies.
Those are two good ones. You should see The Last Detail with Jack Nicholson and Randy Quaid. It's the goofy Quaid, not the serious Quaid, or the young Quaid from The Boys.
I don't know if I know the young Quaid.
Young Quaid is the main character in The Boys.
That is a Quaid. Jack Henry Quaid is young Quaid.
You had brought up the fact that she was a Holocaust survivor, and it was so interesting to me that you really only know that from like a 3-second cut to like Harold looking down at her arm while they're looking at a sunset.
I was going to say there's no dialogue about it, is there? I think it's just that shot.
No.
There's like a moment early on where they're sitting by the fireplace and she says that was before, and she starts to cry, and then they go and play the piano.
Right. That's fairly ambiguous though, because wasn't she talking about her husband who had obviously passed?
They don't go into any detail in that scene. And so I think when you see the number on her arm later, it's like, oh, that's what, I'm assuming her husband died in the Holocaust.
Yeah.
enjoyed the fact that just that quick little bit of background on her. Like, we didn't need anything more, but it just added to this whole like deeper thing of why she doesn't have any worries or anything. She's been through hell, and all she's looking for is just these quiet relationships that she's able to just be herself and just like live life to the fullest. And she's fully content in that. She doesn't need anything more.
I didn't think she was looking for any kind of relationship. She was just doing her thing. I think if you were to take out the Holocaust survivor aspect, I think she would be actually fairly unlikable because she is so extreme. And I mean, she really is an anarchist. She has no respect for any laws or human institutions. She just does whatever she wants. And I think the Holocaust survivor aspect notwithstanding, they almost take this too far where this character would be in jail in real life. It's not believable that she would be able to sustain this lifestyle of just stealing a car every time she wants to go to the grocery store, or, you know, tearing a tree out of a strip mall parking lot and replanting it in the forest, and then stealing a police motorcycle. You could never get away with that.
I had no problem suspending disbelief on that. And, you know, maybe there is an argument to say, like, she knows that her life's going to be coming to an end soon, so now she's just completely gone off the handle. Like, maybe she hasn't been like this for the last 30 years of her life.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, like, I found it completely forgivable because she drops a line. Like, he's like, aren't you hurting people by taking their cars? Like, isn't there something wrong with that? Because she clearly doesn't want to hurt her fellow man. She just wants to live her life to the fullest. It's like, you know, not encroach on anyone else's pursuit of happiness. She's like, well, you know, people need to learn about possession and loss, and it only improves the meaning to their life as a whole. I ate that shit up.
When you realize that her lifestyle is this extreme reaction to what she experienced through that trauma. But sorry,
she's extremely like moment to moment because she's been faced with death at a harsher level than anybody else can like really fathom.
And seen the worst of humanity and the cruelty that humans are capable of.
Yeah, no, I just enjoyed how she brought out the best also in somebody who was like the opposite side of the spectrum of like completely unlovable, and just brings out the best in him. And I think that's what makes her so incredibly charming.
Well, she taught him how to live. That was his arc. I feel like they had a very positive relationship, whereas with the Licorice Pizza couple, there were good things, but then there were also destructive things, and that made it very interesting to me. And that was the same thing with Phantom Thread, where like there were good aspects of it, but then there were very destructive aspects of it.
Both clearly have a age difference element to it.
Yep.
And there's almost something more forgivable about there being, 50 years between them than there being
Harold is also a consenting adult.
Or 10. Right. I don't know how old Harold is supposed to be, but you're right that their relationship is from the get-go is completely functional, and there's not like any annoyance with like a will they, won't they, or anything like that. It's just like a budding relationship. It really different from Licorice Pizza in that way.
This movie also just totally exists outside of time and space, but it almost seems like he's living in some kind of 19th century house that's like frozen in this Victorian era.
He just seems like he is so disconnected from humanity and the times.
I would say isolated.
And I think isolated, yeah. It seems to me like Hal Ashby must have been interested in the idea of someone being completely isolated from their time and place.
Yeah, this isolation is why he never learned how to live, which is why he's obsessed with death. One of the things that makes this movie feel so bizarre tonally is the opening sequences where he writes himself a note, pins it to his chest, walks over, lights a few candles, and then hangs himself. And then immediately after, his mom comes in and has no reaction at all and talks to him as if he's just standing there normally. It just has such a bizarre feel to it that I love. I mean, that's what really hooked me with this movie.
It seems like he's actually hanging from the wide shot. How did you fake this?
I don't even know. He has a talent for these, for sure, yeah. We were talking about Rushmore. His suicides are overproduced. The way that Max Fisher's plays are very overproduced. I listed these. Sorry. The first is hanging, and then he slashes his wrists, and then he drowns himself in the pool. And then he sets himself on fire, and then he chops off his hand. And the last one, I think, not the last one is he drives off the cliff in the car. But then before that, he commits seppuku.
Fire one was my favorite.
I laugh out loud seeing that. It's so funny because he just walks up right after, and the girl is freaking out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The first time I saw it, I remember just laughing out loud when they're sitting at a table just having a conversation and he suddenly pulls out a cleaver and chops off his hand.
And just
So
dry, like
funny.
his face has nothing.
How is the uncle character how is that not a Monty Python character? It seems straight out of Monty Python.
He's great, and this brings up another point that I wanted to talk about is this movie, the character of Maude is fairly anarchistic, but this movie kind of is also when he tells his mom that he wants to marry Maude, and he goes to each of these pillars of their own respective institution, and they each have a picture on the wall of their figurehead idol, and so you have the army guy, and there's a picture of Nixon behind him, and then he goes to the psychiatrist, and there's a picture of Freud, and then they have the priest, and there's a picture of the Pope, and they're all staged in exactly the same way. That's just an incredible sequence.
The priest one is horrifying. But there's clearly this anti-establishment element to it, and I think it plays with the Holocaust survivor thing very well, because somebody would look at anyone who is blindly following anything to be a potentially dangerous situation. But this movie, to me, is counterculture incarnate. Like, that is the purpose of this movie.
Absolutely. I mean, this movie itself is counterculture. So Roger Ebert did not like Harold and Maude. He gave it 1.5 stars, which was kind of interesting. But I looked it up because I was like, I wonder if he just didn't get Hal Ashby, and he gave Being There 4 stars, which is fair because this movie, it's not a masterpiece. And the last episode we talked about Blue Ruin, and I feel like they're kind of similar movies within their own respective directors' oeuvres, where this is kind of a small movie that's good, but it's not a masterpiece. More importantly, it's clearly a talented director at the beginning of their career.
It's certainly not a masterpiece. It's a really good and poignant concept. It's something that you're not going to quickly forget. The effects of his suicides themselves would function as campy if they weren't purposely supposed to be fake. So it has a lot of the pillars of a cult classic, right? It has campiness.
There's a shock element.
Like a sticky shock element. It has characters that you want to just continue to explore and get to know better. There's an interesting conversation to be had about what the difference is between a masterpiece and a cult classic, and are any cult classics actually masterpieces?
Would you consider Being There to be a masterpiece?
Yeah, it's a very tidy package.
How about going back to PTA? Because I feel like PTA is a director who he only really makes masterpieces.
Yeah, but would you consider... There Will Be Blood, I think, is probably the most masterpiece of his masterpieces. And
oddly, it's the least PTA of all his movies.
Yeah, but would you consider that to be a cult classic? Because I don't think I would. I think Boogie Nights, you could say cult classic.
I would say Boogie Nights and Hard Eight are the only ones that are really not masterpieces. And Licorice Pizza, obviously.
I mean, there's a semantic element here where...
what is a masterpiece?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys notice that Maude had repurposed a clay pigeon launcher to fling bird food?
Yeah.
No.
I thought that was really funny.
Yeah.
It's kind of a nice way of summing up her character.
I didn't put together the comedy of that.
I guess I just wanted to say on the topic of the mother, I felt like she was more just oblivious, and she was totally incapable of understanding him and understanding what he was going through, as opposed to somebody who's meant to be like a villain or detestable.
So both of them are completely isolated from society, right? It's
I think her mother is his mother is a socialite.
She is a socialite, but it seems like she's in a bubble.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Of socialites.
Yeah, she's not living on planet Earth.
To me, that's why he keeps faking deaths. She is just completely oblivious to who he is, and completely it's all cries for attention. If this movie is counterculture incarnate, she is
culture incarnate.
Like culture incarnate. Yeah.
She is culture.
She is society. Yeah. There's a couple great movies that are kind of similar to this that I wanted to mention. There's a Douglas Sirk movie from the 50s. I think it stars Rock Hudson, but it's called All That Heaven Allows. And it's about a forbidden relationship. It's a melodrama. Douglas Sirk is a famous director of melodramas. This movie was remade in the 1970s by the German director R.W. Fassbinder. That remake is called Ali, Fear Eats the Soul, which is more interesting in my opinion. But it's about an elderly German woman and a North African immigrant who is 30 plus years her junior, and they fall in love, and it's about their forbidden relationship because of the the racism and everything in Germany at the time.
That sounds great.
I had no idea that there was a remake. I've seen All That Heaven Allows. That's like a classic Rock Hudson movie, but I didn't realize that there was a remake. That's kind of cool. We got to check that out.
And it is fantastic. That's about all the time we have for today. I'm Christian Seel. I'm here with Zander, Massey, and Blake Bauman, and this has been the Nakatomi Break Room, where the three of us are filling football helmets with cottage cheese and looking at pictures of B. Arthur.
What?